Hey, good afternoon. Hope you're having a great day. So we're in the time of Sfirat Omer, which is the days between Passover and Shavuot. And it's a time of introspection, a time when we try to perfect our emotions, our characteristics. And it's also a time when we focus and dwell on love between one Jew and another, especially since we learn in the Talmud that this is the time when 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva passed away. They couldn't respect and love each other. And it's interesting because in this week's Torah portion of Kedoshim, the second portion, we read the very famous law that says, Ani Hashem. Love your fellow as yourself, I am God. And of course we know what Rabbi Akiva says, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. Rabbi Akiva quotes this and Rashi brings it down, that this is a big central focus and law in the Torah. And the question is, why does it say, love your fellow as yourself? Ani Hashem, I am God. What's the connection? And the Midrash says something very fascinating. The Midrash gives an example and says like this. You know, the guy who travels from his little province to the city, to the headquarters city, capital of his country, and something happens, he does something wrong, and he gets sentenced by the king to death. And he gets sentenced by the king to death, and he comes to the king and he looks at him and he says, I ask you one favor. Before I get put to death, at least let me go home and visit my family. Let me say goodbye to my wife and my kids. And the king says, are you kidding me? You think I'm stupid? If I let you go away, you'll never come back. How am I going to guarantee that you come back to face your judgments? He says, I'll tell you what. I have a friend who lives here in town, my best friend, and he'll stand in my place. He'll be my guarantor. If I don't come back in 30 days as we make up, he'll be killed instead of me. So the king starts laughing. Which friend's going to do that? Which idiot's going to go and be in your place? You're never going to come back and he's going to agree to be killed? So he says, watch. And he goes, he brings his friend, and the friend comes to the king and says, I'm agreeing to stay here, to be here, and if he doesn't come back in 30 days, I'll be killed in his place. 30 days comes, and this friend doesn't come back, so they take his friend, and they bring him up to the gallows to get killed. Everyone's watching, and they're putting him up, ready to tie the noose, and suddenly they hear a commotion. And they look back, and they see his friend running from the train to the car. He says, wait, I'm back. The guy runs up and says, I'm here. I'm the guy that's supposed to get killed, not him. Let him go. The guy, his friend, who's on the gallows now says, no, it's too late. You came back too late, and I promised I'll be the one. They have to kill me. And they go back and forth, and they're fighting. The king is mesmerized. He's looking. How could this be? He's never seen friends like this. And he looks at the friend and says, you know what? He says, I'll make a deal. I'm not killing anyone on one condition. That you let me be part of your friendship. I've never seen a friendship like this with so much love and so much care. It says, the Midrash says, Hashem, love your fellow as yourself. Ani Hashem. When you love your fellow, when you give the true love to another Jew, when you're kind, when you're non-judgmental, when you're ready to sacrifice for someone else, God says, Ani Hashem, I want to be part of this friendship. I want to be part of this relationship. And, I mentioned this on Sunday, but this week, Gurney lost her uncle. Our uncle, who actually was here in Boston, named our first son Levi, and was very close to us. And I heard this story this week. There's many stories, and I'd love to share some of them. But I heard the story about right when he left. He had just come to Miami. It was 1969, I think. And in 1981, he moved to Bell Harbor. And in fact, back then in Bell Harbor, they had taken away the restriction from Jews having a deed. So you were allowed to buy land. You weren't allowed to buy land in Bell Harbor till 1969. And then you weren't allowed to join the club till 1982. But he come the first time. He rented a little apartment, and he would go schlep people out to get a minyan. Today, they have a whole block on Collins Avenue, 95th Street, and he comes and he says he gets a place and he ends up in the hospital to visit someone who just had a baby. They come, they had a baby boy, Mazel Tov, we're going to get a mold, be next Tuesday. He hears that someone down the room a little bit further also had a baby boy the same day, and the father is from Puerto Rico, a Puerto Rican, and the mother's Jewish, so the kid is Jewish, and he goes to visit them, Mazel Tov, whatever. They look at him, who's this rabbi with a beard and a kippah? Finally, he ends up chatting with them. He says, next Tuesday we have a mole coming, and we're going to do a bris for our friend over here, his son. We could do a bris for your son too. He says, but the kid's not Jewish. He says, what do you mean? The mother's Jewish, the kid's Jewish. He says, yeah, but the father's never going to agree. He's a Puerto Rican. Why would he agree to this? And please leave. We don't want to see you go away. They kick him out of the room. Rabbi Lipsker can't. He says, why did the Rebbe send me? Why am I here in this town if I'm not going to help a guy get a bris for a mother get a bris for the child? So he finds out where they live, and he goes to visit them in a trailer park. And he knocks on the door and says, hey, what are you doing here? Anyways, he finally convinces them, the father. He says, please have a bris. He's a Jewish kid. It's free. It's a blessing, etc., etc. But they say, what are you doing here? You don't know us. Why do you care about us? And he says, there's a man in Brooklyn, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he loves you, and he sends me here. And finally they agree to have a bris. The next Tuesday comes, they have the bris, and the rabbi says, what are you going to name your child? So they say, what are we going to name our child? I don't know. We don't know. The father's not Jewish. We don't have anyone to name for. But you said there's a man in Brooklyn, and he loves us. So tell us, we'll name our child for him. So Rabbi Lipsker says, we don't name the child for a living person. So he says, okay, what's his father's name? So he says, his father's name is Levi Yitzchak. So right there, she gives her child a name, Levi Yitzchak. And today, somewhere in Miami, there's this 50-plus-year-old guy running around whose name is Levi Yitzchak. And the only reason he had a bris and he has a name Levi Yitzchak is because his mother knew that someone in Brooklyn loved her because she was a Jew unconditionally. And that's the story the Torah says, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your fellow like yourself. Ani Hashem. Then I am God. I want to be part of this beautiful relationship. It's something that we could use so importantly now in Israel. Our brothers and sisters, to be able to love unconditionally, to be able to understand differences, to be able to respect people that think and act and might look at life different than you. And then God promises, Ani Hashem, I will dwell with you in this relationship. And He protects us in the holy land of Israel and our brothers and sisters all over the world. God bless you. Have a great day.